Title: At the New Year's Awards night, I saw my wife leave the stage with my rival. What happened backstage was heartbreaking. It's a chilly New Year's Eve in New York City, where the vibrant streets are alive with celebratory energy. Amidst the iconic skyline, the prestigious New Year's Excellence Awards night is underway at the luxurious Waldorf Astoria Hotel, a venue synonymous with elegance and grandeur. The red carpet glistens under the dazzling flash of cameras, while celebrities, business moguls, and industry elites gather to honor the most accomplished individuals of the year. The air buzzes with excitement, the clinking of champagne glasses blending with soft orchestral music. Our protagonist, James Carter, a successful but grounded entrepreneur, sits at a lavishly decorated table near the stage. Dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, his demeanor reflects both pride and anticipation. Tonight, his wife, Emily Carter, is a nominee for the coveted Entrepreneur of the Year award, a recognition of her groundbreaking work in the tech industry. The couple has always been admired as a power duo, but James can't shake the nagging feeling of unease that has been growing in him over the past few weeks. Emily, radiant in an elegant silver gown, seems to be the epitome of poise and grace. Yet, James notices something different. Her laughter feels forced, her smile fleeting. For weeks, Emily has been distant, consumed by work commitments, late meetings, and excuses that didn't sit right. But tonight, James pushes aside his doubts, wanting to be her biggest supporter on what should be a milestone evening for them both. The atmosphere shifts subtly when Robert Sinclair, James's longtime professional rival, enters the room. Robert, a charismatic and overconfident tech magnate, is known not only for his business acumen but also for his knack for stirring trouble. He saunters in, his tailored suit and smug demeanor commanding attention. To James's dismay, Robert seems unusually interested in Emily, offering her a congratulatory nod and a lingering smile that immediately sets James's nerves on edge. As the night progresses, James can't ignore the subtle yet unsettling interactions between Emily and Robert. Whether it's the quick exchange of glances during dinner or the way Robert positions himself near her throughout the evening, James feels a growing sense of suspicion. The grandeur of the event, the glittering chandeliers, the perfectly arranged floral centerpieces, suddenly feels suffocating as James realizes this night may not be the celebration he had envisioned. The stage is set for an evening of revelations, heartbreak, and confrontation, where the personal betrayal will unfold against the backdrop of New York's most glamorous event. The stakes are high, and James is about to uncover secrets that will change the course of his life forever. The evening takes a significant turn when the host announces, and the Entrepreneur of the Year award goes to Emily Carter. The room erupts into applause, the spotlight shining brightly on Emily as she rises gracefully from her chair. Her silver gown sparkles under the cascading chandeliers of the Waldorf Astoria ballroom. Her smile a mix of pride and humility, or so it seems to the hundreds of onlookers. James, seated at their table, claps with genuine pride, momentarily setting aside his unease. He watches as Emily walks toward the stage, her steps confident yet slightly hurried, almost as if she's eager to get this moment over with. On her way, her eyes briefly meet James's, but there's something missing in her gaze, something distant, almost detached. The applause feels deafening to James, but his growing discomfort mutes the celebration around him. Emily takes the stage, and as she begins her acceptance speech, James hangs on to her every word. She talks about dedication, resilience, and teamwork, mentioning how support from those closest to her made this achievement possible. While the audience eats up every word, James notices something troubling. During her speech, Emily glances not toward him, but at Robert Sinclair, seated at the front row. Her fleeting gaze is subtle, but it lingers just long enough for James to notice. Robert, lounging confidently in his chair, catches her look and responds with a smug, almost predatory smile. It's the kind of smile James has seen before, one that exudes arrogance and triumph, as if Robert knows something James doesn't. The moment feels heavy, but the crowd's cheers drown out James's thoughts, leaving him with nothing but a gnawing pit in his stomach. When the applause dies down, Emily steps down from the stage. James expects her to walk back to their table, to sit beside him and share this victorious moment. But instead, Emily makes an unexpected move. As she descends the stage, Robert rises from his seat, intercepting her path. In a move that feels choreographed, the two exchange a quiet word before walking away together toward the backstage area. James's world seems to stop. He watches as the woman he loves disappears from view with the man he despises most. The glittering grandeur of the ballroom suddenly feels cold and hollow. The celebratory atmosphere, filled with clinking champagne glasses and the hum of excited conversations, becomes a background blur as James tries to process what just happened. Confused and suspicious, James debates his next move. Should he let this slide, trusting that Emily will return soon with an innocent explanation? Or should he follow them, uncovering the truth, no matter how painful it might be? His thoughts spiral as he remembers the subtle changes in Emily over the past few weeks, her late nights, vague excuses, and the emotional distance between them. Now those moments feel like breadcrumbs leading to a betrayal he never wanted to believe was possible. The glances, the distance, the secrecy, all the clues that James ignored are now converging in his mind. He knows he can't stay seated, pretending everything is fine. With determination, he rises from his chair, his heart pounding in his chest. The celebration continues around him, oblivious to the storm brewing within him. As James makes his way toward the backstage area, he steels himself for whatever truth he might uncover. Explanation of outline. 3. The backstage confrontation. Truth unveiled in the shadows. As James steps into the dimly lit backstage area of the Waldorf Astoria, the vibrant noise of the awards night fades into the distance, replaced by the hushed whispers of event staff and the low hum of machinery. The air is cooler here, with a faint scent of fresh paint and cleaning supplies. The stark contrast between the opulent ballroom and the unadorned utility space mirrors the emotional transition James is experiencing. He's stepping from the illusion of celebration into the harsh reality of betrayal. James moves cautiously, his polished dress shoes clicking softly on the tiled floor. Every step he takes heightens his anxiety, but it also strengthens his resolve. The trail of his wife, Emily, and his rival, Robert Sinclair, has led him here, and he's determined to uncover the truth. The hallways are a maze of corridors, but just as he rounds a corner, he hears voices, muffled but unmistakably tense. Peeking around the edge of a partially opened door, James's breath catches. Inside the small, cluttered room, he sees Emily, standing uncomfortably close to Robert. Her arms are crossed, her posture rigid, and her expression is conflicted. Robert, on the other hand, exudes his trademark confidence, leaning casually against a table, his lips curled into a smug grin. "You're overthinking it, Emily," Robert says, his voice smooth yet laced with provocation. "James doesn't appreciate you the way I do. You deserve more than being a trophy wife, always in his shadow." His words drip with arrogance, and James's fists clench involuntarily as he listens. Emily looks away, her gaze distant. "It's not that simple, Robert," she replies, her voice trembling slightly. He's been good to me. I don't know what I'm doing anymore." Her tone reveals her inner conflict, wavering between regret and denial. It's clear she's battling emotions she doesn't fully understand, leaving James frozen in place, torn between storming in and listening further. Robert steps closer to her, his hand brushing against her. You don't have to feel guilty, he says, his voice lowering to a whisper. I know you're unhappy with him. We both know this marriage is more about appearances than love. His words sting James like a dagger, each sentence unraveling the trust he once held in Emily. Unable to take it any longer, James pushes the door open, his entrance abrupt and commanding. The sound startles both Emily and Robert, their heads snapping toward him in shock. So this is what's been going on, James says, his voice sharp with a mix of anger and pain. The room feels suffocating as the three of them stand frozen, the weight of the confrontation pressing down on them. Emily's face pales, her expression a mixture of shame and fear. James, it's not what it looks like, she begins, but her words falter under the intensity of his glare. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, Robert interjects, his smirk never fading. Maybe if you weren't so busy with your work, James, you'd realize how unhappy your wife is. His taunt is calculated, designed to provoke, and it works. James steps forward, his composure cracking. Stay out of this, Robert, James snaps, his voice rising. This is between me and my wife. He turns to Emily, his eyes searching hers for an explanation, for anything that could make sense of the betrayal. But Emily remains silent, her guilt written all over her face. The grandeur of the evening, the applause, the award, the celebration, feels like a cruel joke now, overshadowed by the raw emotions playing out in this backstage room. The truth is out, but the confrontation has only just begun, and the choices James makes now will determine the fate of his marriage. The confrontation intensifies as the small backstage room at the Waldorf Astoria becomes a battleground of emotions. The dim lighting and confined space amplify the tension between James as Emily Agia and Robert, each of them caught in a whirlwind of accusations, guilt, and anger. James stands at the center of the room, his presence commanding yet vulnerable, his fists clenched by his sides. He looks at Emily, searching her face for answers, for any glimmer of the woman he thought he knew. Tell me the truth, Emily, James says, his voice trembling with a mix of heartbreak and fury. How long has this been going on? His eyes lock onto hers, but Emily hesitates, her lips parting as if to speak, but unable to find the words. The silence is unbearable, and Robert takes the opportunity to fan the flames. Does it matter, James? He says with a smug grin, his arrogance infuriating. She's been unhappy for a while. You're just too blind to see it. His words cut through James like shards of glass, but they also push him closer to unraveling the truth. Emily finally speaks, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. James, I didn't plan for this to happen, she begins, her eyes welling up with tears. I was lonely. You were always so consumed with your work, your own success. I felt invisible. Her confession hangs in the air, raw and heartbreaking, as James processes the weight of her words. Lonely? James repeats, his voice rising with disbelief. I supported you through everything, Emily. Your dreams, your career, even when it meant sacrificing my own time. And this is how you repay me? His voice cracks, the pain evident in his tone. The grandeur of the awards night feels like a cruel backdrop to this moment of vulnerability. Outside, the applause and celebrations continue, oblivious to the personal tragedy unfolding behind the scenes. The contrast between the public celebration and this private heartbreak underscores the gravity of the betrayal, making the scene even more poignant. Emily's tears flow freely now, her hands trembling as she tries to explain herself. I didn't want it to go this far, James, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. But Robert, he made me feel noticed, appreciated. I didn't know how to tell you what I was feeling. James's heart shatters as he listens, but his anger turns toward Robert. "You knew exactly what you were doing," he growls, stepping closer to his rival. "You took advantage of her vulnerability just to get back at me, didn't you?" The accusation is direct, and Robert's smirk fades slightly, replaced by a flash of defensiveness. "I didn't force her into anything, James," Robert retorts, raising his hands in mock surrender. "She came to me because you were too busy building your empire to notice her. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself." The room falls silent for a moment, the weight of Robert's words hanging heavily in the air. James looks back at Emily, her tear-streaked face a picture of guilt and regret. He feels a mix of emotions, rage at Robert, disappointment in Emily, and a deep sense of failure in himself. The emotional breakdown reaches its peak as James realizes there's no undoing what has been done. The betrayal is out in the open, and the illusion of their perfect marriage is shattered. The decisions he makes in the coming moments will define their future, but for now, he can only grapple with the raw pain of the revelation. The emotional turmoil in the backstage room at the Waldorf Astoria reaches its boiling point, and the confrontation begins to shift from raw accusations to decisive moments that will define the future for James, Emily, and Robert. As James takes a deep breath, his clenched fists slowly relax, but the fire in his eyes remains. He steps back slightly, his voice steadier now, but still carrying the weight of his heartbreak. "I trusted you, Emily," James says, his tone laced with a mixture of pain and resolve. "I gave everything to this marriage, and yet here we are, standing in the shadow of my own success, with you and him tearing it apart." His gaze shifts briefly to Robert, who stands by the wall, arms crossed, still holding on to his overconfident facade. "And you," James adds, his voice sharp. "You think you've won, don't you? But this isn't a game to me. This is my life, my family." Emily's sobs grow quieter as she wipes her tear-streaked face, but her guilt is palpable. She finally looks at James, her voice shaky but sincere. "I never meant to hurt you, James," she whispers. "I didn't know how to tell you I was unhappy. I know I've made mistakes, but I never wanted it to end like this." Her admission softens the tension in the room, but it doesn't erase the damage done. James takes another step back, his mind racing as he processes her words. The applause and chatter from the awards night feel distant, muffled by the weight of the decisions he now faces. He knows he has to make a choice, whether to try to salvage what's left of their marriage or walk away from the betrayal for good. Robert, sensing that the conversation is slipping away from him, tries one last time to provoke James. "Let's face it, James," he says with a smirk. "You and I both know you're better off without her. She deserves someone who actually notices her." But this time, James doesn't rise to the bait. Instead, he looks Robert straight in the eye and says, "You can keep your petty games, Robert. You'll never be more than a cheap opportunist, and I won't let you define my story." His words hit their mark, and for the first time, Robert's smugness falters, his confidence visibly shaken. Turning back to Emily, James's expression softens, though the pain in his eyes remains. "Emily," he says, his voice quieter now, "I don't know if I can forgive this. But I deserve someone who's honest with me, someone who fights for us, not against us." The weight of his words lingers as Emily breaks down again, her regret spilling out in sobs. Finally, James steps toward the door, pausing briefly before turning back to deliver one last statement. "I'll be at the hotel tonight. Take some time to think about what you want, because tomorrow I need an answer. Either we rebuild this together, or we go our separate ways." With that, he walks out, leaving Emily and Robert alone in the suffocating silence of the backstage room. The grandeur of the awards night continues as James steps into the cool night air outside the Waldorf Astoria, the bright lights of New York City contrasting with the darkness of his thoughts. The turning point has arrived. His life will never be the same, but he's ready to take control of his narrative. Whether it's reconciliation or closure, the power now lies in his hands. Explanation of outline. 6. The aftermath and new beginnings, closure or continuation. As James exits the grand Waldorf Astoria, the crisp New York air hits him, bringing a sense of clarity after the chaos backstage. The city's lights stretch endlessly, a reminder of the world moving forward, even as his life feels momentarily paused. The chatter and laughter of people outside the venue contrast with the heavy silence James carries. But he knows this moment is pivotal. It's the beginning of a new chapter, no matter how painful the transition might be. Inside the hotel suite where James has retreated, the space feels both comforting and isolating. He sits by the large window overlooking Times Square, the neon glow illuminating his reflective face. As he replays the events of the night, the betrayal feels sharper than ever, but so does the resolve that followed. He knows he has given Emily a choice. But deep down, he wonders if the damage can ever truly be undone. Meanwhile, back at the Waldorf Astoria, Emily sits in the now empty backstage room, her makeup smudged, her heart heavy. The echo of James's words, "I need an answer," rings in her ears. For the first time, she confronts the full gravity of her choices. Her gaze falls on her reflection in a nearby mirror, and she barely recognizes the person staring back. The awards, the glamour, the fleeting validation of her affair with Robert. It all seems hollow now. Emily knows she must decide whether to fight for her marriage or let it go. The guilt is suffocating, but so is the fear of losing James forever. She pulls out her phone, scrolling through old photos of happier times, trips to Central Park, their anniversary dinner at the River Cafe, their first Christmas in their Brooklyn apartment. These memories are a stark contrast to the wreckage of their relationship now, but they remind her of what they once had. At the same time, Robert, who has been left to process his own role in the chaos, retreats to his penthouse in Upper Manhattan. For him, the night's events have been a mixed bag. He relished provoking James, but now he faces the reality of losing Emily, someone he thought he could manipulate easily. He pours himself a glass of whiskey, his overconfidence starting to waver as he realizes the fallout of his actions. The next morning, James wakes up to the sunlight streaming through his hotel window. He feels a strange mix of exhaustion and determination as he prepares for the day ahead. He knows Emily's decision will shape his next steps, but he's also come to terms with the fact that his self-worth isn't tied to her choice. Whether she chooses to reconcile or not, James is ready to reclaim control of his life. Emily, meanwhile, arrives at the hotel suite to meet James, her heart pounding. She carries a letter she wrote overnight filled with her reflections and an earnest apology. As she steps into the room, the tension is palpable. "James," she begins, her voice trembling, "I know I've broken your trust and I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I want to fight for us, if you'll let me." The story leaves viewers on the edge of their seats, with James contemplating her words. His decision, whether to rebuild their marriage or walk away, is left ambiguous, allowing the audience to interpret the ending based on their perspectives. The stark contrast between the grandeur of the awards night and the raw emotional fallout afterward provides a dramatic arc that resonates deeply. The setting of New York City, with its iconic landmarks and ever-moving energy, underscores the theme of resilience and new beginnings, making the story both relatable and cinematic. Thank you for being a part of this story with me. If it moved you, please give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Narrate VE Stories. I've noticed many of you who enjoy these stories aren't subscribed yet by subscribing. You're not just following a channel, you're becoming part of a community that values deep, meaningful storytelling. Let's continue exploring these heartfelt journeys together. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you won't miss our next story, oh?